there, this is Tara. Today I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about this idea of samskar. Samskar as it arises from memory. What is the samskar? It's a word that we use very easily in everyday language in India. We say, oh, isme to sanskar hi nahi hai. He has no sanskar. Oh, he has very good sanskar. What does that mean? That is simple language. Okay. Sanskar, basically, the way we use it means that this person has very good habits. He's cultivated, a very good cultural practices. So maybe he's very well behaved, and or maybe he's not, and we use it to mean he lacks a good upbringing. What does it actually mean? So in Sutra 11 of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, he says, Anubhuta Vishayaha Asampramoshaha Smritihi. That is, memory is that which does not escape from the perception of an object. So T. Krishnamacharya, who is the guru of both B.K. Iyengar and Pattabhi Jois, in his commentary, he says, Anubhuti is basically the change that occurs in the mind when the mind gets connected with sense objects through the senses. And the repeated interaction of the jiva with the sense objects creates an impression, and from that impression, repeated interaction, a certain power arises. That power, he says, is samskara. So samskara arises from memory, the memory of the repeated interaction. When objects can be, what is memory? Memory is when objects can be understood without being physically present. So sanskar, that is what arises, is a power that arises from memory, which arises when objects don't have to be necessarily present, which means you can remember things without there being an objective substratum. Okay, so when we use samskar, for instance, when you see a child genius prodigy, you say, oh, he has sanskars from his last life. What does that mean? Okay, it means that he has some residual knowledge which has no evidence of training or practice in the present life. So therefore we say it has come from a past life. And in fact, on September 17th, in his speech of September 17th in 1893, Swami Vivekananda says the same thing in Parliament of Religions in Chicago. And he says that he's talking about rebirth and, the carrying forward of the stored memory, what the Buddhists call alaya. And he says we cannot deny that bodies acquire certain tendencies from heredity. But those tendencies only mean the physical configuration. So typically when we talk about inheritance, we talk about, I look like my mother, I look like my father, I have the physical characteristics of my grandfather. So we are talking about physical factors. However, there are other tendencies peculiar to a soul caused by past actions, Swami Vivekananda says. And a soul with a certain tendency would, by the laws of affinity, take birth in a body which is the fittest instrument for the display of that tendency. This is in accord with science, for science wants to explain everything by habit, and habit is got through repetition. So repetitions are necessary to explain the natural habits of the newborn soul. And since they were not obtained in the present life, they must have come from the past life. Okay, so that is how Swami Vivekananda explains it, though I have also heard other versions sort of say that the body that you are in will display the tendencies most suited to it, and those which you have, which are buried in the unconscious, that are not suited to your current body, will be displayed whenever it is a suitable situation for it. So let's simplify. Basically, what we are saying is, when our mind comes into contact with sense objects, it creates an impression through the senses. This impression, that if there are sustained interactions, the impression lingers even when the object is not present. This is memory. From memory arise sanskaras. Sanskaras are a particular power that arises from memory, and this lingers through lifetimes, from body to body, okay, as we pass through the samsaric cycle. This samskara, according to Krishnamacharya, is what gives rise to understanding. And for this, the jiva must be linked to the mind. The ability to remember stays with us for a long time. Why I thought this was interesting is also because what they are saying, what the gurus are saying, what the rishis are saying about samskara, is we never lose anything. We never lose any interaction that we have in the world. Not in this life, not when you were a monkey, not when you were a tiger, not when you were a sparrow, not when you were a bug. Okay? Every single impression that you have ever had, every interaction is stored in the memory. And not just in the surface memory, but in the deep unconscious memory of the soul. And this is what travels from life to life. And when you reach a body which has use and value to present that memory, that is when it comes up. Until then it stays buried. So it sinks basically into the unconscious of the chitta. What are these impressions? These impressions are what in yoga we call vrittis. So deep in the unconscious, it is a subliminal action. Okay, and our work in this life, okay, to exit the cycle of samsara is to free ourselves of all these buried vrittis. Everything that is in the deep unconscious, when it is completely brought to the surface and dissolved, that is when we say we are enlightened. We have no balance of samskaras left. So, how do we do this? Right? Now, it's very interesting because when when you read about the enlightenment of great souls, for instance, the Buddha, Gautama the Buddha, as soon as he gains enlightenment, the first thing that appears in front of him are the memory of all his lives, thousands and thousands of lives. There's a recent book on it that I reviewed for Frontline, also called The 1,000 Lives of the Buddha, very interesting, in which it's described in detail, and there are many sutras and folklore about each of the lives of the Buddha, the previous lives. So, but what is the purpose of disregarding the content for some time? What's the purpose of remembering the past lives? Shouldn't he be free? Once you're enlightened, why do you need to remember your past lives? Because until you remember where you came from, you cannot decide or understand where to go. You're not truly liberated in that sense. So remembering the past, sorry, we have an electricity problem here. Remembering the past is very, very essential for correct knowledge. Okay, so for instance, in Hinduism, where we believe in rebirth and karma and what is happening to you now, sometimes we get very angry that this was done to me and that was done to me. When you realize that in a previous life, maybe you have harmed somebody, maybe I have harmed somebody, and therefore this was just payback, then I put my life in context. Or maybe I haven't harmed somebody and this was an injustice done to me. Then I understand better why that happened, how that happened, what is the path of justice that is required. Okay, so it is also said that a specific experience leaves a specific samskara. There is no confusion. You will not have a feeling of anger towards somebody who has not harmed you, right? If there has been a situation of conflict, it leaves a samskara by which, say I run into that person in this life, then I have a feeling of resentment, or a feeling of anger, a feeling of guilt, a feeling depending on who has done what. So the memory of the specific experience springs only from that particular samskara, which was formed out of a particular experience. Okay, and how is this explained? That let us say I drink a cup of coffee and the taste lingers in my mouth. So the next time, say in another life, I experience coffee, I know exactly what it is, and it gives me the associated feeling associated with coffee, maybe wakefulness. Okay, so I understand this and I'm drawn to it repeatedly for that purpose. So an object awakens samskaras in the mind through external stimuli. Hence, a thought arises subjectively from within without a stimulus from outside. Since samskara is based on memory, let's say I'm studying late at night and I don't have coffee and I want to feel awake. I have this craving for coffee that comes up within me. This is a samskara. Okay, so samskara is basically described as a seed that has gone into the unconscious, and the cycle that it perpetuates is endless. To give you an example, the banyan seed. Okay, from one single banyan seed you get a single tree. From that tree, thousands of seeds are generated. Each of those seeds again will generate a tree that generates thousands of seeds. So each samskara, and as the Buddha explained, each sankhara that sits inside you generates one tree, one experience, but each experience generates thousands more sanskaras, and this is how we are stuck in the cycle of birth and death. So the whole process of meditation and yogic practice that we are involved in is to uproot each samskara. How do you ensure that each sanskara that has been created by memory, which has been created by repeated interactions with the sense objects, not just one, repeated interactions. Let's take the example of the child who is born as a music prodigy. In some life, he has practiced that music so repeatedly that the samskara is strong in the next life. So when he's a 5-year-old child, he knows all the ragas. There has been no evidence in this life of training or practice. Therefore, the sanskara in the previous life has been very, very strong. Therefore, it has carried forward. Right? Now, how do we uproot our sanskaras? Because this is, if you have understood the banyan example, this is a never-ending process. This is how we get stuck. We uproot the samskara by using meditation or yogic practice to come to non-duality, non-attachment, equanimity. This is in fact the entire process of even vipassana meditation, where we say the more you practice, what rises to the surface are the buried samskaras. So the more you sit with the mind, the more you practice yoga, the buried samskaras, the seed in the unconscious, will become conscious. When it comes to the surface, the minute you react to it, you say, oh, this is what this person did to me when I was 5 years old. I need to give them good. Okay? You're acting with aversion. You are watering the seed. You're adding sunlight. You're adding nutrition. And the seed is growing into a tree. That tree will have other repercussions. If I actually pick up the phone and shout at the person who did this to me when I was 5, that is another sanskara. That is again creating another branch from which more seeds will grow. So when the unconscious seed rises to the surface, the solution is to not react. To look at it and say, oh, this exists. I have neither raga nor dvesha. I have neither attachment nor rejection or aversion. When you do that, the seed is not receiving water, sunlight, nutrition, and it will basically die out. It will come to the surface and it gets released. This is the way to deal with samskaras. But the important thing to remember is you cannot come to this process until you remember. There is no enlightenment without remembering every single sanskara that is a part of your, not just life, your stream of lives. So only when you understand every single action you have taken is the liberation. So during the process of meditation, during the process of yoga, difficult memories, all memories will come up. A memory that comes up may be even, oh, that song I used to sing when I was 13. It can be a fight you had when you were 21. It can be, a food you had a craving for once, or that you had tasted somewhere, a place you had traveled to. Every single memory that you have experienced in all your lives is going to start emerging the more you practice whatever your practice is, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga. As it comes up, you have to remember not to react. That is the way to release it. So I hope this has been useful to you. Please do leave any comments or questions in the comment box below, and do keep watching. Do hit subscribe if you haven't yet. Thank you.